Good evening and welcome to another Mothman Podcast. We are your number one source for sci-fi and paranormal podcasts. Also be listening for podcasts from Moth and Flame. You'll be hearing about hypnotherapy and mediumship.
And also, please like and subscribe and comment on YouTube. Follow us on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Instagram, Twitter, and more. And you can find out a lot more about our services on mothmanpodcast.com.
Good evening. Hi, I'm Darrell Rourke. This is Mothman Podcast, and here with me is Bruce. Bruce, wants to say hello?
Hey, happy Halloween, guys. Well, it's not Halloween yet, but we're almost there.
It's getting closer. It's
right
getting closer.
Corner, yeah.
A lot of the neighborhoods are having special events starting this coming weekend, and actually, you and I will be at a special event. Hopefully, if it's not raining in Clemens, and we hope everybody comes out and sees us and says hello and talks to us about
that's on the 20th, right?
20th, that's correct.
And that's from 2 to 4?
2 to 4.
Yep.
2 to 4. And we'll be there, and we'll have a lot of our equipment that we use during our special investigations into the paranormal. And so you'll be able to see our equipment and talk to us about maybe some of your paranormal events. But tonight we thought we would, since this is October and we're growing close to Halloween, we thought we'd talk a little bit about the history of Halloween. And Bruce is going to take us back in time and start off with how this all came about.
Oh, yeah. We're going to talk about the origins of Halloween. And Halloween's origins actually... Halloween's origins actually date back to the ancient Celtic festival of Samhain, which is actually spelled like Samhain, like Samhain. I know a lot of people have heard it pronounced that way, but it's actually pronounced Samhain. The Celts, who lived about 2,000 years ago in Ireland and UK and northern France, used to celebrate their new year on November 1st, which was also known as All Saints' Day. And this day marked the end of summer and the harvest and the beginning of the dark, cold winter. That was a time of year for them that was, closely associated with human death. The Celts believed that on the night before the new year, the boundary between the worlds of the living and the dead became blurred. So on the night of October 31st, they would celebrate Samhain, and they believed that the ghost of the dead from the previous year, would return to the earth and walk the earth. And they thought that, these otherworldly spirits would cause trouble, damage crops and stuff like that. So they also thought that the spirits made it easier for the Druids, their Celtic priest, to make predictions about the future. So it was kind of a good thing and a bad thing,
all at
the
same time.
And to commemorate the event, Druids built like huge sacred bonfires where the people would gather to burn crops and animals as sacrifices to the Celtic deities. During the celebration, the Celts wore costumes, typically consisting of animal heads and skins, and attempted to tell each other's fortunes. So they were trying to put Amanda out of a job.
There you go.
And then when the celebration was over, they would go home and they would relight the fire in their hearth and their fireplaces, which they'd extinguished earlier that evening from because of the sacred bonfire. And
they weren't experiencing climate change, so it's so hot now. We don't even coats anymore.
Yeah, and by 43 AD, the Roman Empire had actually conquered the majority of the Celtic territory. And in the course of the 400 years that they ruled the Celtic lands, 2 festivals of Roman origin were actually kind of combined with the Celtic celebration of Samhain. The first was Feralia. Feralia was like a day in late October when the Romans would traditionally commemorate the passing of the dead. And the second was a day to honor Pomona, the Roman goddess of fruit and trees. And the symbol of Pomona is actually the apple, and the incorporation of the celebration into Samhain is actually what explains the bobbing for apples tradition that we have today.
Right, and that makes the apples very important. Still makes the apples very important to the tradition of Halloween.
Oh, yeah. And then...
I like the candy apples.
Oh, dude, I love candy apples. I really do.
I start thinking about the fair. Okay.
And then like the history of trick or treating was kind of like borrowed from like European traditions. What it was is America in the late 1800s. Well, this was actually more recent.
Well, Halloween really became popular in the United States in the 1900s. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was in the 1900s. It was big, but what actually started it there, I couldn't find my place, was the All Souls Day and the Soul Cakes.
Oh, okay.
What it was is back in England during the All Souls Day parade. During the festivities, poor citizens would beg for food, and and these families would give them pastries called soul cakes, and in return, they had to promise to pray for that family's dead relatives.
Oh, okay.
So the distribution of like soul cakes was encouraged by the church as a way to replace the ancient practice of leaving food and wine for the roaming spirits, because that's what they used to do. Like originally, what the Celts would do is they would put food outside their houses to keep spirits from coming in.
Right.
And so this was the church's way of kind of replacing that and doing a little good, because you're now you're feeding the poor. And the tradition of dressing up in the costume for Halloween was both European and Celtic roots. Like I said, the Celts would wear animal heads and animal skins.
Right.
But what it was is, sorry, excuse me. It was believed on Halloween, when it was believed that the ghost would come back to the earthly world, people thought that, they would encounter the spirits if they left their homes and walking around in the streets. So to avoid being recognized by these ghosts, people would wear masks and when they left their home after dark, so that the ghosts would actually mistake them for fellow spirits.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And leave them alone, right?
Yeah, that was their way of getting them to leave them alone outside of leaving the food and stuff. And you'll actually like this. This is the history of the Jackolantern. Because the Irish, it's actually very American for us to carve pumpkins, because Ireland didn't have pumpkins. So the Irish, what they would do is the Celts, they would actually carve their jack-o'-lanterns out of turnips and rutabagas.
Really?
Yeah.
I'd like to see those now.
Yeah. And so the story behind it is, it's called The Tale of Stingy Jack. You'll get a kick out of this. The Jack-o'-lantern legend goes back hundreds of years, and there's different versions, but this is the most popular version. Stingy Jack, he was a miserable old drunk who took pleasure in playing tricks on just about everyone, family, friends, his mother, and even the devil himself, apparently. Yeah, he's doing that Devil Went Down to Georgia deal. Right. So the story goes, one day he actually tricked the devil into climbing up an apple tree. And while the devil was up in the tree, Stingy Jack took a bunch of crosses and crucifixes and put them around the trunk of the tree so the devil couldn't get out of the tree. Okay. Yeah, because the devil couldn't touch it. And since the devil was stuck, Stingy Jack actually made him promise not to take his soul to hell when he died. Because, since he was kind of a miserable old dude, yeah, right. He knew he wasn't going to heaven, so right. He promised the devil not to take his soul. And once the devil promised, Stingy Jack removed the crosses, and the devil climbed out of the tree. And then many years later, when Jack died, he went to the pearly gates of heaven and was told by St. Peter, because he was mean and cruel and led a miserable, worthless life on earth, that he wasn't allowed to enter heaven. So St. Peter sent him to hell. And when he got to hell, the devil said, well, I got to keep my promise. I can't take your soul, so you can't come into hell either. So now Jack was scared. He had nowhere to go but to wander around forever in the dark of the netherworld between heaven and hell. And he asked the devil, how could he leave since there was no light for him to see? So the devil tossed him an ember from the flames of hell to help light his way. And the only thing Jack had on him was a turnip, because that was his favorite food. He always had one on him. So he took the turnip out of his pocket and hollowed it out and put the ember that the devil gave him inside the turnip. And then from that day onward, Stingy Jack roamed the earth without a resting place, lighting his way as he went with his little jack-o'-lantern.
So we took that and made it into a pumpkin.
Yeah, so. We basically ended up using something bigger and much easier to carve.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, that is basically that's basically it, though. I mean, that is the story of Halloween, trick-or-treating, and...
So tell me a little bit about your past history in Halloween. When you were growing up, did you go out on Halloween every night? On every 31st?
I did when probably from the ages of 5 until about 10 or 11. Once I got about 12 and 13,
oh yeah, that's all of us.
Friends would have Halloween parties and costume parties. I'd go to that, but
right.
we weren't doing trick or treating anymore.
And the fun left it after that, though, right?
Yeah,
it did for me. It was so much fun. I was kind of like you until I got about 13, 14 in that range. I can remember my last Halloween. I dressed up as a hobo and went out and took my pillowcase with me and filled it up. But we used to go out, when I was younger, and things were, I guess, a little bit more safer then, and the parents didn't have to go. You didn't have a chaperone party.
Yeah, people weren't putting razor
blades and all that kind of stuff. So
all that stuff. Yeah.
So we would go around to our neighborhoods, and sometimes we'd walk and go into other neighborhoods, but it was just so much fun that all the kids would get together and we'd go out and we really didn't do any mischief. We didn't. The worst thing is you
didn't egg any houses or TP anybody.
Well,
not that you can admit.
not the egging part, but we've had some girls we wanted to try to get their attention. You know how that goes.
Oh yeah.
And so some of us guys would kind of take the toilet paper and over the yards.
I know I TP'd a house or two on Halloween, but it was usually the people annoyed me.
Right. No, this was more trying to get the attention. And we would do things like that, and so. But I remember there was this one house in the neighborhood, and that was they'd have kind of a party, and you'd go and you get your treats, and then you go bobbing for apples and things like that, and that was really neat and cool. Yeah. And then we'd go around and get our stuff. And my brother and I, it was just the two of us growing up. It was, but we'd bring his stuff in and we'd dump it in the middle of the floor. And when he wasn't looking, I'd pull half his rack over his back and stuff. So it's one of those type things that.
Yeah, what we used to do is like our tradition. After we got too old to trick or treat,
right.
Some of the nicer neighborhoods that would they would put up these extravagant displays and
right.
stuff like that. You go check out how other people's cool decorations and see
I
what
remember.
they did. And me and my brother and our friends, we would always try to at least go to a haunted house. Not a real haunted house like
right.
we do, but one of the haunted houses or the corner.
What
mazes.
We perceived as a haunted house. Every neighborhood always had one that stood out, and so.
There was always at least one little urban legend
right.
about a house in the neighborhood. But,
and it's so sad today that we worry about the mean people putting razor blades and pins and all kind of stuff in the candy. So we really can't take our kids other than the neighborhood that we know about, or a lot of churches now have trick or treat where they, it's a controlled environment and you take your kids around, but it's just not the same as it was when we were growing up. But I remember growing up and there was nothing when I was maybe 6 years old to take a bus and go downtown, and there's nobody going to take a bus
right.
and go downtown at 6 or 7 years old anymore. So, things were just completely different than they are now. And I feel sorry for the kids growing up because of how things are now. It's sad.
Yeah. This is a fun fact about Halloween. In the United States, almost 30% of all the candy sold in the year is
sold at
Halloween
right.
time. Yeah.
Yeah. I've read some articles where it says if the candy company doesn't make their yearly profit during the month of September, October, and some of it runs into December with Christmas.
Yeah,
but
stocking stuff for candy.
Yeah, but the majority percentage is sold in October.
Right.
So, and if you go into any grocery store, any store today, you can't walk in without bumping head into either candy or a Christmas decoration. Christmas is getting closer and closer as it goes by too. So.
Because it's so hard to go out and do that kind of stuff anymore. Our biggest tradition has always been, the night of Halloween, just have a horror movie fest,
just get together,
just have a horror movie marathon. And speaking of which, a new horror movie just came out on the 15th on DVD and Blu-ray that I just watched. Rob Zombie's 3 from Hell. It's pretty fantastic.
Is it?
For those of you who have watched like his first 2 films, House of a Thousand Corpses and Devil's Rejects, this is the 3rd film to that. And the only reason why it took him so long to make this movie and it wasn't in theaters very long is because Sid Haig, the guy that plays Captain Spaulding, he was sick during the filming, and he actually just passed away a couple weeks ago at the age of 80. So.
Well, I guess we need to have a new episode where Bruce analyzes new films coming out.
Yeah, that
especially
was
the horror films.
For anybody who's seen a Rob Zombie film knows he has a knack for over-the-top gore and just insanity when it comes to those kinds of movies, and this one is just as as insane as his first.
So you wouldn't recommend this for your little kids?
Oh, absolutely not. You'd be that is bad parenting if you let your kid watch through.
They're gonna be sleeping with you for a month, right?
Yeah, say 3. It's literally called 3 from Hell. That is you're off to a bad start as a parent if your kid watches that.
Well, listen, to all you listeners out there, we wish you a happy Halloween. We hope everything is safe and your kids have a really good time. And so from us at Mothman Podcast, thank you for listening, and we hope that you tune in for our next episode. Thank you again.
Good night, guys.
And good night from Mothman Podcast. We hope you enjoyed tonight's episode.
And don't forget, like, subscribe, and comment on YouTube. Follow us on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Instagram, Twitter, and more. And take a look at our website, mothmanpodcast.com, to find out more about our services.